The moment Rachel Pierce realized the man in the expensive suit had found her, she knew three things would happen. People she cared about would be in danger, her carefully constructed new life would crumble, and she'd finally get the chance to finish what had started 5 years ago when someone cut the brake lines on her car. What she didn't know was that a 13-year-old girl with a leg brace would be the key to everything, or that 97 motorcycles would thunder into Pinewood, Colorado before the week was out. The mountain air bit cold that October morning as Rachel unlocked the Copper Kettle, her cafe on Pinewood's main street. Her right leg, permanently damaged from the crash that had supposedly killed her, protested each step, but she'd learned to work through pain. The wooden cane she carried wasn't just for support anymore. It had become part of her identity here, the quiet cafe owner who'd appeared 18 months ago and asked few questions about anyone else's business. She noticed the black sedan immediately. Wrong plates, wrong attitude, wrong everything. It sat outside the mayor's office like a predator marking territory. Inside the cafe, she went through her morning ritual with extra care, arranging cups and checking sight lines to all entrances, old habits from her previous life as a federal prosecutor. The hidden room behind her office bookshelf held equipment most cafe owners never needed: surveillance monitors, encrypted communications, and a wall covered in photographs of a man named Julian Blackwell. "Morning, Rachel." Sheriff William Hayes pushed through the door, his 70 years worn like a comfortable jacket. Former Army Ranger, now the law in a town that rarely needed much of it. "Coffee's fresh." She poured without asking how he took it, 3 months of routine having established their pattern. Saw the sedan. His eyes held questions. So did I. They didn't need to say more. William had been a soldier long enough to recognize when trouble arrived in expensive packaging. The girl came in at 7:40, same as always. 13 years old, metal brace visible on her left leg, backpack slung over thin shoulders. Amy Watson moved carefully, each step calculated, eyes already scanning for threats before entering anywhere. "Hot chocolate?" Rachel asked, though she'd already started making it. "Please." Amy's voice was soft, practiced at not drawing attention. Rachel brought the drink to Amy's usual corner booth, the one that gave her a clear view of both entrances. The girl was learning without being taught, absorbing lessons about survival that no child should need. "Rough morning?" Rachel asked gently. Tyler and his friends were at the bus stop again. Amy's fingers traced the edge of her cup. "They took my backpack, dumped everything." Rage flashed through Rachel, cold and familiar. She'd seen too many bullies in her career, from playground thugs to corporate criminals. The tactics differed, but the cruelty was identical. "Where's your mother?" "Night shift. Won't be home until 8. Rachel made a decision. "After school, come here, I'll drive you home." Amy's eyes widened. "You don't have to." "I know, but I will." What Rachel didn't say was that she'd recognized Amy the moment the girl first walked into her cafe 3 months ago. The Watson name was fake, chosen hastily. The girl's real name was Amy Hayes, daughter of Daniel Hayes, the undercover agent who'd worked Rachel's case against Blackwell Industries 5 years ago. The agent whose accident had preceded Rachel's own by exactly 3 months. Daniel had been Rachel's brother. At 9:15, the man in the expensive suit walked into the Copper Kettle. Julian Blackwell hadn't changed much. Same practiced smile, same calculating eyes, same aura of controlled menace wrapped in $1,000 tailoring. He scanned the cafe with the assessment of someone accustomed to evaluating assets and threats. His gaze settled on Rachel. Something flickered in his expression, doubt perhaps, or recognition beginning to form. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice the careful neutral she'd perfected over 18 months. "Black and information." He slid into a booth. "I'm looking to speak with property owners in this area. New development opportunity." Rachel poured his coffee with steady hands, despite her heart hammering. Most properties have been in the same families for generations. Folks here aren't much interested in change. Everyone has a price, Miss Pierce. Rachel Pierce. Well, Miss Pierce, I find that resistance often stems from not understanding the benefits of progress. His smile never reached his eyes. Perhaps you and I could have a longer conversation about the future of Pinewood. I'm happy with the present. He studied her, and Rachel felt the weight of his scrutiny. Blackwell was many things: murderer, manipulator, architect of corporate destruction, but he wasn't stupid. If he looked too closely, if he compared her face to old photos from 5 years ago. Interesting cafe. His attention shifted to her cane, propped against the counter. Accident? Car crash? How unfortunate. Something in his tone suggested he found it anything but unfortunate. These mountain roads can be so dangerous. Rachel's hand tightened on the coffee pot. He was fishing, testing, not quite certain, but suspicious enough to probe. The door opened, saving her from response. Sheriff William entered, his presence immediately changing the room's dynamic. Morning. William's casual greeting carried undertones of territorial warning. Don't believe we've met. Julian Blackwell, Blackwell Industries. The businessman rose, extending his hand, here to discuss development opportunities with local leadership. That's so. William's handshake was brief. Strange nobody mentioned consulting with law enforcement first. An oversight I'm sure the mayor will correct. After Blackwell left, William approached the counter. That's him, isn't it? The one from your case. Rachel nodded slowly. The sheriff was one of 3 people in Pinewood who knew her true identity, a necessity given the stakes. He suspects something, she said quietly. The way he looked at me, asked about my leg. What do you need? Time. And I need to get Amy somewhere safe. William's expression hardened. You think he knows about her? Not yet. But he will. He's too thorough to miss connections once he starts looking. What Rachel didn't know was that Blackwell's people were already moving, that Tyler and his gang of young bullies had just been hired for bigger work, or that the valuable resource Blackwell sought beneath Pinewood was worth enough to justify any crime. The town meeting that night packed Pinewood's community hall. Blackwell stood at the podium, his presentation slick and professional. Digital renderings showed modern buildings replacing Pinewood's aging structures, promises of jobs and prosperity flowing like honey. Rachel sat near the back, observing. Amy sat beside her, the girl insisting on attending despite her mother's absence. 3 rows ahead, the sheriff maintained his own watch. This development represents a $50 million investment, Blackwell announced. 200 construction jobs, 500 permanent positions. Pinewood will become a destination. Rachel raised her hand. Your economic projections assume 70% retail occupancy. National averages run closer to 45. How do you justify the discrepancy? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Blackwell's smile tightened fractionally. We have commitments from national chains, signed letters of intent. May we see them? Confidential at this stage. Convenient. Rachel stood, leaning on her cane. And the environmental impact study? Pinewood sits on a critical watershed. Construction of this scale requires extensive mitigation measures. All proper filings have been completed. Strange. I checked with the Colorado Department of Environmental Quality yesterday. They have no record of any submissions for Pinewood. The room erupted. Blackwell's composure slipped, his eyes fixing on Rachel with sudden, terrible focus. She saw the moment recognition clicked into place, the instant he realized who she really was. You, he breathed, loud enough for nearby attendees to hear, you're supposed to be dead. In that moment, Rachel knew everything was about to accelerate. Blackwell wouldn't wait. wouldn't proceed cautiously. He'd move fast and violently to eliminate the threat she represented. She grabbed Amy's hand. "We need to leave, now." But Tyler and 3 others blocked the exits, no longer just bullies but hired muscle. The trap had already sprung. William's hand moved to his service weapon. "Stand aside, boys." "Can't do that, Sheriff." Tyler's voice carried ugly confidence. "Mr. Blackwell wants to have a conversation with the lady." What happened next moved with the chaos of breaking glass. William drew his weapon, shouting commands. Rachel pushed Amy behind her, her free hand reaching for the small revolver she'd started carrying again. The crowd panicked, people scrambling for doors. Through the confusion, a sound penetrated, deep and unmistakable. Motorcycle engines, dozens of them, approaching fast. The community hall doors burst open. An old man entered, silver-bearded, leather-vested, moving with military precision despite his 70-plus years. Behind him, more riders in matching vests, a steel eagle emblazoned on the back. "Iron Eagles," Rachel whispered, relief flooding through her. "Somebody call for backup." The old man, Mitchell Gray, surveyed the scene with combat-trained assessment. "Heard our girl might need help." Mitchell had founded the Iron Eagles 40 years ago, a motorcycle club for veterans dedicated to protecting communities from exactly the kind of predators Blackwell represented. Rachel's father had been a founding member. After his death, Mitchell had become the closest thing to family she had left. Blackwell's hired thugs found themselves suddenly outmatched and outmaneuvered. The Eagles moved with coordinated efficiency, former Marines, Rangers, and Special Forces operators who hadn't forgotten their training. "This isn't over," Blackwell hissed, backing toward a side exit. "I own this town. I own the mayor, half the council." "But you don't own the truth," Rachel said clearly. "And you don't own us." He fled, but Rachel knew this was just beginning. Men like Blackwell didn't surrender. They escalated. Over the next 3 days, Pinewood became a battlefield. Blackwell's security forces, mercenaries with military backgrounds, set up checkpoints. The Iron Eagles countered with their own presence, 97 riders forming a protective net around the town. Rachel used the time to gather what she needed, documents hidden by Pinewood's previous mayor, Amy's grandfather, proving the real reason for Blackwell's interest. Beneath the town lay a massive rare earth mineral deposit worth billions. The development project was simply cover for extraction operations that would destroy Pinewood once the resources were depleted. Amy proved crucial. The girl knew where her grandfather had hidden his private files, records maintained in a forgotten vault beneath the old library. Together with Mitchell's team providing security, they retrieved geological surveys, environmental studies, and most critically, evidence of previous Blackwell crimes in other towns. The final confrontation came at the emergency council session called to vote on Blackwell's proposal. Rachel entered with Amy at her side, Mitchell and the Eagles forming an honor guard. Sheriff William was already there, along with what seemed like half of Pinewood. "My name is Rachel Pierce," she began, her voice carrying throughout the packed chamber. "That's not entirely true. My real name is Rachel Hayes. 5 years ago, I was a federal prosecutor building a case against Julian Blackwell for racketeering, fraud, and murder." She gestured to Amy. "My brother Daniel was working undercover on that case. When his identity was discovered, his car's brake lines were cut. He died on a mountain road outside Denver. 3 months later, the same thing happened to me. I survived. My driver didn't." Rachel presented the evidence methodically. Geological surveys proving the mineral deposit, documents showing Blackwell's pattern of destroying communities, recordings of threats made against townspeople, and finally, her own testimony as a prosecutor who had nearly brought him down once before. "This isn't about progress," she concluded. "It's about exploitation, about a man who sees Pinewood as a resource to extract and discard." The council vote was unanimous against Blackwell's proposal. More importantly, FBI agents arrived within the hour, acting on information Mitchell had channeled through his law enforcement contacts. Federal warrants were served. Assets were frozen. Blackwell himself was arrested trying to flee through a back exit. As the authorities led him away, Blackwell met Rachel's eyes one final time. "You think this ends it?" he said. "I'll be out in 6 months." "No, you won't," Rachel replied quietly. "Because this time, I have something I didn't have 5 years ago." "What's that?" Rachel looked at Amy, standing beside her, at Mitchell and the Eagles who had ridden to her defense, at Sheriff William and the townspeople who had stood firm despite intimidation. Witnesses who won't disappear, evidence that can't vanish, and a community that refuses to be afraid. 6 months later, the Iron Eagles returned to Pinewood for a different kind of gathering. The new community center, funded by the town's decision to develop the mineral deposit responsibly through a public trust, stood gleaming in mountain sunshine. Rachel stood at the podium, Amy beside her. The girl had officially reclaimed her true name, Amy Hayes, and was thriving without the constant fear that had shadowed her childhood. "My father used to say," Amy spoke to the assembled crowd, her young voice steady, "that the measure of a community isn't its wealth, but how it protects its weakest members. For a long time I thought being weak meant having this." She gestured to her leg brace. "But I learned something here. Weakness isn't physical, it's moral, and Pinewood proved it has the kind of strength that matters." Mitchell approached after the ceremony, his weathered face creased with pride. "Your father would be proud, Rachel. Both of them would be. We finished what they started. More than that, you showed Amy what the Hayes family stands for, what the Eagles stand for." He glanced at where Amy was talking animatedly with other kids, her disability simply one part of who she was, not the defining characteristic. "That girl's going to do great things." "She already has," Rachel said softly. As the celebration continued around them, as Pinewood embarked on its new chapter of prosperity built on community ownership rather than corporate exploitation, Rachel allowed herself something she hadn't felt in 5 years: peace. The war wasn't over. There would always be another Blackwell, another threat. But for now, in this moment, justice had prevailed, and sometimes that was enough.